Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. Today's video is going to be about a camera I've had my eye on for a long time, but one which I haven't reviewed here before, largely because I focus on Japanese cameras. Occasionally I do reviews of cameras made in other places, and today is going to be another one of these kind of reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about the Kodak Signet 35 camera, which is a high-quality 35mm film fixed lens rangefinder camera made in the United States back in the 1950s, from 1951 until 1958. When I was reading the top of this camera, the Kodak Signet 35 camera, I kind of had a little bit of a laugh because it's kind of funny when something which is obviously a camera needs a word on top to tell people it's a camera. I can't imagine many people in the 1950s picking up something like this and not having any idea what it was, and then seeing the word camera on the top. Oh, it's a camera. I kind of got a kick out of the words on the top here. But anyway, as I said, this camera was made in America in the 1950s and features a lot of the cool design features and the durability and ruggedness of things which were made in America in that age. When I received this camera, it didn't work. The shutter wasn't working, the shutter release lever was jammed, and the focus wasn't very smooth. So I took the camera apart down to its basic components to clean it up and try to find what was wrong with it and then put it back together. I didn't find anything wrong with the camera other than it had a lot of dried up oil and grease in it, and those were the issues which were causing the problems it was suffering from. Now, as I was taking the camera apart, I had a kind of interesting experience because I've never worked on a camera which was so easy as this one. Basically, this camera, it can be disassembled with just 2 or 3 tools, a slotted screwdriver and a Phillips screwdriver, and optionally, if you want to remove the shutter assembly, a spanner tool which would fit in the back to remove that. But that can be removed with a fabricated tool, or even something like a fork from your kitchen, in a pinch. And as I was looking at this camera, it looked more and more like something which was intended for military service rather than use on the main market. Now, the military, when it produces machinery or things, it tries to make it as simple as possible and as easy to repair as possible, so that way they don't have to give people a lot of training or require them to carry a lot of tools in order to repair, maintain, or do whatever is necessary. And as someone who's been in the military myself, I was, this thing definitely had some military DNA in it. And as it turns out, the Kodak Signet was produced in versions for the military. You can spot these quite easily because they feature black anodized metal surfaces and olive drab green leather on the front, back, and top. And these were made for the Air Force and for the Army back in the day. And I still can't decide whether this camera was originally designed for the military, and after they produced a few examples, they decided that this would be quite a good camera to sell on the main market, or if it was originally intended to sell to the main market, but the construction was simplified or engineered to make it more appealing to the military. Whatever the case, the results are an excellent camera. Now, in regards to its military DNA, there's a little bit more to it. This camera was designed by a man named Arthur Crapsey. And Arthur Crapsey was a military veteran. He served in the Army Air Force, and he was a pilot of a B-17 bomber. And his last mission over Germany, his bomber was hit, and he lost a leg in that incident, and afterwards was sent back to his hometown in Rochester, New York. Now, anyone who's familiar with the city of Rochester knows that it's long been the, headquarters of the Kodak company. And after returning to Rochester, Mr. Crapsey applied to the largest employer in the city, which was Kodak, and they gave him a job. And I can't find any record of him having any education in engineering or manufacturing. The most I can figure out is that he had some experience in ceramics in his younger years before the military. Yet he designed a couple of really good cameras for the Kodak company. One of them, of course, is the Signet 35, and the other one is the Hawkeye Brownie, or Brownie Hawkeye, which was produced in the zillions. Huge numbers of these cameras were made, and I see these even here in Japan. They were one of the most popular cameras of the 1950s. They were a simple box camera made out of bakelite, which had plastic lenses. And when I was a kid, I used to see them all the time in flea markets and garage sales and swap meets and stuff like that. But that was very much on the low end of the scale, and the Kodak Signet 35 is very much on the high end of the scale. The Signet was Kodak's effort, a result of Kodak's effort to do more manufacturing in the USA. And maybe there was something to do with military use involved in this. Kodak was producing other 35mm cameras. These were the Retina series, which were being produced in Germany. And the Retinas had been made in Germany both before and after the war. And at the time the Signet was being made, the Retina 3C was being produced in Germany. As this was a domestically made camera and locally produced, and a much more simple camera than the Retina, this camera was less expensive, and that made it a popular seller. Now, one of the most interesting things about this camera is the materials and workmanship that go into it. The workmanship is basically military. It has everything it needs and nothing that it doesn't need, and everything fits together perfectly and smoothly. And the quality of the materials in this camera are simply amazing. So for many years I've been reviewing cameras made here in Japan. And back in the 1950s, when Japan had jumped into the photography industry with both feet, it was a different world. Japan didn't have any, and still doesn't have any, raw material resources for the metals they need to manufacture cameras. All these things have to be imported. Back in the 1950s, almost everything was imported from America. At that time, America was pretty much 2/3 of the world's economy and possessed almost 2/3 of the world's gold supply. And in order for Japan to import these things, they had to face the big issue of a very weak yen versus a strong dollar, which meant the cameras made in Japan in the 1950s were used cheap metals as much as possible and expensive metals as seldom as possible. So your typical Japanese SLR or rangefinder camera of the 1950s, the main structure or internal parts are made of cast zinc. Now, zinc is a very inexpensive metal, and it's very easy to work and can be molded at low temperatures or cast at low temperatures. The more expensive materials being used were usually brass. So the top and bottom covers would be brass. The most expensive material would be nickel or chrome, and this was applied to the outside of the brass. And in the 50s and early 1950s, many Japanese cameras had so little chrome plated around the outside that if you rub hard enough with your finger, you can get the chrome to come off and you can see the brass underneath. This camera here was made domestically in America, and of course had access to domestically made materials. And this camera is made almost entirely out of aluminum. There's some steel in it, some glass obviously, and a little bit of leather. And if I open up the camera and take off the back door, you can kind of see. This is the back door to the camera, and it's made of a solid piece of cast aluminum, and quite a heavy piece. No Japanese camera manufacturer in the 1950s could afford to use this much metal in a camera like this. And then we have this chrome-plated pressure plate here, and this is what is known as hard chrome. Now, hard chrome is a different substance than the kind of chrome that they put on the bumpers of cars and decorate other things with. It's more wear resistant, and the process of putting it on is a little bit more difficult. So Kodak, being that they were located in America, could use much higher quality materials in the construction of their cameras. And the rest of the camera is made with the same materials. The top cover and rest is also very durable, and that's also one of the things which makes me believe that this camera was originally designed for military use, is its incredible rugged design. It's very sturdy, and if your rifle runs out of ammunition and you drop it, you don't have a bayonet. If you've got one of these cameras in your hand, you can knock someone on the head with it and probably knock them out quite quickly. So yeah, something that you can use for more than just taking photographs. So let's go ahead and take a look at the features, controls, and functions of the Kodak Signet 35 camera. Before I show the details, I'll hold the camera here, and the amazing thing about this is holding it. When you put it in your hands like this, you find that it fits in your hand perfectly and that your fingers end up in the places where they ought to be. Your first finger ends up here above the shutter release button. Your finger on the left hand side ends up by the shutter charging lever, and your other finger, you have easy access to the shutter speed selector ring and also the lever which you use to change the aperture. It's very well laid out. It's also very easy to access the winding button with just your thumb. So yeah, everything is where it should be, nothing is where it shouldn't be, and this camera doesn't feature anything but what it has to have. That's a big contrast to modern digital cameras, which you have to dig very, very deeply inside to find all the features and controls and programs and settings and things which these cameras include. This camera has nothing on it but a shutter, an aperture, and a winding mechanism, and that's pretty much it. And then the controls which will allow you to use this. There's nothing electronic, no menus or settings or things that you have to dive through to try to get the picture you want. It's very well laid out. So starting at the top here, I kind of mentioned before that this is the film winding dial. Since this camera doesn't have any film in it, it kind of winds endlessly and the mechanism doesn't lock on the next frame. If you put film inside, it works properly. If you want to take a multiple exposure or you want to dry fire the shutter without film in the camera, there's a release button down here on the bottom. And in the middle here we have the film counter. Now, like other cameras of the 1950s, including the Retina series, which were made in Germany, you have to reset this counter manually after you load film into it. And it's quite easy with this one. You simply push it to 0. And it's easier than the Kodak Retina series, where you have to push a combination of 2 different buttons in order to wind the film counter back to 0. And of course here we have the film rewind knob, which is pretty much in the same place as it is in most cameras. And on the back bottom here we have a release lever. You push that over to the left and that unlocks the winding mechanism and allows you to rewind the film. So a pretty basic system. On the front of the camera we have the basic controls. We have the viewfinder window, and though this camera has a kind of tiny and squinty viewfinder window on the back, it does have, if you can get your eye close enough, it does have a nice viewfinder and a pretty good field of view. The rangefinder focusing window is over on this side and it has kind of this unique triangle system on it, which allows for a contrasty rangefinder patch, and also you can use the rangefinder patch to help to compose your image. The triangle system is pretty neat. On the bottom part, you can use it to find the horizon or the lower or upper horizon, and there are a couple little smaller triangles which you can use to mark the thirds on the left or right side or the upper third. It's an incredibly clever system. And this definitely has a bit of military DNA in the design of the rangefinder system on this camera. On the front we have the shutter release lever, which is quite large and easy to use even if you're wearing gloves. On the bottom here we have the focusing lever, and around the focusing ring there is a focusing scale which is arranged in feet. This camera was originally designed to be sold in America, so they didn't add a meter scale to this. Despite the fact that this was intended mainly for the American market, this camera was popular enough that they ended up pretty much all around the world. Ahead of the focusing ring, we have the aperture selector lever, and this camera features a Kodak Ektar lens with an aperture range of f3.5 to f22. Normally in these lenses, I tend to get the best performance between f5.6 and f8. When you go beyond f8 to f11, f16, or f22, you start to suffer from diffraction, which kind of takes away from the quality of the images. In the next part of the shutter moving forward, we have the shutter charging lever. And as I said, you have to wind between frames in order to be able to discharge the shutter, and that allows you, or I guess stops you from accidentally taking double exposures. If you want to take double exposures, you can use this lever down here. This allows you to take as many photos as you want without winding the lever. In front of that we have the shutter speed selector ring. And we have a very simple range of shutter speeds here, from bulb and 1/4 of a second up to 1/300th of a second. Now that's not as precise as some of the other shutters which were on the market in the 1950s, but this shutter is incredibly reliable and incredibly simple compared to other ones which were available. And of course we have the lens here. Now the 45mm Ektar lens is a superb performer, and the images I've been able to dig up taken with this lens are really wonderful. Lots of sharpness, lots of contrast, and also a wonderful color saturation. So a superb lens. A lot of people say that the lens on this old 1950s camera is up to standards with many of, maybe that's an exaggeration, or maybe that's a little bit of people's personal opinion speaking. But they say that it's competitive with more modern lenses. I'll just leave it at that. I don't know yet. I haven't put film through one of these cameras, and I may do so with this one, because the more I handle this camera, the more I like it. The more of a wonderful picture-taking tool it seems. On the bottom of the camera, we have a standard 1/4-inch tripod socket. We have these screws around here, these Phillips head screws, which happen to be the same size as the ones which are located under the knobs on the top. So if you have a Swiss Army knife with the basic tools on it, you can use that to mostly disassemble this camera if there's some kind of issue. And I don't know of any other cameras which allow you to do that kind of maintenance with something like a Swiss Army knife. On the back of the camera, we have a exposure computer, and this computer is pretty interesting. It has a set of adjustments here that you can use for setting film speeds. Now, it's not set up in ISO or ASA. It just has the name of the Kodak films at the time. We start off here with Kodachrome. That's not the more modern Kodachrome 64. This is the old Kodachrome of the 1950s. Then we have Plus X, which is kind of a high-speed film. That's here. And then we have Super Plus X, which is pretty much the highest speed film which was available back in the day. And kind of just a little bit hint over here from Plus X, we have a blind click. And this blind click equates roughly to ASA or ISO 100. And if you go to the Kodachrome, in the 1950s, this would be ASA or ISO 12. So a very slow film. And Plus X works out to be about ISO 120. And Super XX works out to be about ISO 200. So if you do the click just to the side of Plus X, that gives you ISO 100. And when you match this to, say, ISO 100 film like Fuji Acros, you can use the computer and just kind of slide this along here. And this shows you the situation: hazy sun, a bright sun, or cloudy. And it gives you a combination of aperture and shutter speeds, and using your eyes to see how much light there is. And the setting on the bottom, then you would use the slide rule here to just compute your exposure for the aperture and shutter. So quite simple system. And if you were using, say, 200 speed film, you would go ahead and slide this over to Super XX, and that would allow you to use films like Kodak Gold 200, which is quite a popular film. And of course, despite you can use new film. New film it's expensive nowadays, but it has gotten cheaper somewhat recently compared to what it was getting up to. But used film is quite commonly available and quite reasonably priced, and in most places it tends to last well past its expiration date. I've successfully used film from going back to 2002 and 2003, and so if you can't find the modern film and the speed you like, you can always on eBay or some other place find older vintage film. And I usually find that if the expiration date is within 20 years, it works. But if it's beyond 20 years, it's quite hit and miss. It depends on the climate where the film was stored. If it's in some place like California or the West Coast where the temperature is pretty basic, static throughout the year, it lasts longer. But if you live in climates where the weather gets much hotter, it doesn't last as long. So pretty simple, I hope, simple explanation of the exposure computer on the back here. Now, a camera like this is very good for someone who really wants to learn the nuts and bolts and basics of photography, and not just film photography. Now, the basics, I mean, this is a basic mechanical device, and if you're capable of putting together a jigsaw puzzle, you have enough, I guess, mechanical ability to do much of the work necessary on this camera, to remove the top cover and to clean out the optics if that's necessary. And even enough to disassemble the front of the shutter and do any cleaning on the inside if that is necessary. As for learning the art of photography, you have the basic formula here. You have an assortment of apertures, an assortment of shutter speeds, and you have a basic computer on the back telling you what shutter speed and aperture to choose for a given film speed and given conditions. So quite an interesting device here. So this camera I didn't buy to keep, and I got it in order to sell, so I'm going to be listing it in my online stores fairly shortly. I've got I received a lot of inquiries about the Ricoh 35L, which I had said I was going to be listing on my stores. As it was, I had to take that camera more apart in order to fix an issue I had with the linkage with the light meter. And now that I've got that fixed and everything seems to be working smoothly, I'll go ahead and list that one. So hopefully I'll have both that camera and this one here listed in my online stores tomorrow. So if you're interested in buying a really nice and working example of a Kodak Signet 35 camera or the Ricoh 35L, please check out my stores. I'll post links to my stores in the description below the video. So as you can tell, I've produced quite a few videos recently, and I'm still convalescing from my big bicycle wreck last month. The doctor today said that I only have one more visit in 2 weeks, and by that time I should be cured. My clavicle is mostly healed. My ribs are pretty much healed. Everything else on my body seems okay. My head is working properly again. So over the next 2 weeks and beyond that, I hope to be able to post more videos. I've got more cameras on the way. If you'd like to see these, please subscribe. If you like the video, please like it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.